Everyone, my name is Kylie, and I'm sure you've never heard a story quite like mine. At first sight, we are an ordinary family, and I am an ordinary girl. In the morning, when mom and dad leave for work, they drop me off at school on the way. In the evening, we eat dinner together if everyone arrives home from work on time, and then sometimes we watch movies. Oh, and on weekends, we feed the ducks in a nearby pond. That's pretty much all. We're a very normal and maybe even a little boring family. At least that's what I always thought. When I was growing up, I was sure that my parents had very normal jobs. One of my friend's dads had an interesting job. He was a fireman. However, it seemed simply impossible that either of my parents could have a dangerous profession. My mom always worked with flowers, making bouquets, and later opening her own small florist shop. It was a very peaceful and beautiful profession. The most stressful her job ever got was if some impulsive young man had forgotten to buy a bouquet before a date and demanded the most beautiful roses on short notice. I've never known exactly what it was that my father does. When I was a child, every time I asked a question, I was told that his work was very important. When I was about 5, I got the impression that he was the deputy of some big boss or the chief of the deputy in a state organization. No one ever told me what the organization was because, according to adults, I wouldn't know what it was. In general, I had the impression that his work involved dealing with a lot of papers or something like that. I wasn't that interested in knowing the details, so this explanation satisfied me and kept me from raising the question anymore. When anyone at school or anywhere else asked me what my dad did, I just told them that he worked for the government and I didn't know any details. If they continued to interrogate me, I just started talking about my mother and enthusiastically told people how she makes bouquets and makes people's lives beautiful. Like at any other job, sometimes my dad worked until very late, and sometimes he worked on the weekends. I didn't see anything strange in this. It happens to everyone. His periodic business trips didn't surprise me either. You never know where you will need to go for important state affairs, or at least I didn't. Sometimes I noticed that my mom would get nervous when she couldn't get a hold of my dad. But my mother is subtle, creative, and often worried. Therefore, at such moments, I remained in complete confidence that nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Except a couple of times, I accidentally saw that my dad would talk with some men in black suits at the end of our block. They were clearly discussing something important, but I simply assumed that these were his friends from work who hadn't had time to change after leaving the office. I first began to notice strange things a few months ago. Once, I went into my parents' room while my dad was getting ready for work. He was in the middle of getting something out of the closet, and when he realized that I was there, he immediately hid whatever it was he was getting out and sent me to eat breakfast. At first, I didn't think much about this occasion. Then I saw some black cars pass by our house several times. And one evening, I returned home and heard my mother and dad in the kitchen discussing something related to the words danger and weapons. When I entered, they immediately shut up and began to act as if nothing had happened. But neither of them were actors. My parents were clearly nervous and did not want me to know why. The thought that something was being hidden from me began to creep into my head. Naturally, I wanted to get to the bottom of this. One evening, when Dad was taking a shower after work and my mom was cooking dinner, I snuck into their room, opened my father's closet, and found nothing. But knew he was hiding something from me. I looked around and began to wonder where whatever it was might be. There was nothing under the bed, and again in the closet, there were only dark suits and ties. And then I accidentally leaned on the inner wall of the closet and felt that there was a void behind it, and knew that must be the hiding place. I returned to my parents' room the next day when no one was home. My conscience tormented me a little, but my curiosity was stronger. I opened the closet and pressed on the wall where I had felt the void the day before. Nothing happened right away, but eventually the door opened. I took off the wooden panel and found behind it several heavy, small containers. They were made either of iron or, judging by the weight, concrete. I could not open the containers, but at the very bottom of the cache, I found something that scared me. There lay a gun, clearly not a toy. I was scared and intrigued at the same time. Why does my dad need a gun? What does he store in these impenetrable containers? The answers to my question came suddenly. One evening, when Dad was on a business trip, someone knocked on our door. Mom opened the door. There were several people in black suits standing at the door, very similar to the people I had seen with my dad before. Mom suddenly turned pale, But of course, such guests do not come every day. They all came into the house, and my mother sent me to my room while she went into the living room to talk with these businessmen in suits. Half an hour later, they called me into the living room. I tensed a little bit, but still came down. What's happening? Did we do anything wrong? I thought to myself. First, my mother sat me down in front of her and made a long speech about how I was already an adult and that I was responsible and sometimes unforeseen situations happen in life. After all this, the men who had arrived earlier came to ask questions. They wanted to know if my dad had tried to contact me in the last 48 hours by any means, if I had noticed anything strange and all things like that. I did not understand what was going on. If my dad wanted to contact me, he would just call. Why would he do something else? It turned out that all my questions had one very shocking answer. It turns out my dad is a secret agent. I could not believe my ears. I looked at my mother for confirmation, but she only nodded that they were telling the truth. It turns out that my dad, whom I considered the most ordinary dad in the world, is now on a dangerous mission. He missed his check-in, and no one has heard from him for 48 hours. They explained to me that they and their colleagues visited agents' families only in the most emergency cases, so I should not tell anyone about this. The men in black suits then discussed something with my mother before leaving. After everything that happened, we could not sleep. All night, my mom and I waited for some news. It wasn't until the morning that my dad finally called us and said that everything was fine and he would be home soon. That evening, we gathered as a family in the living room. My parents told me that Dad has been a secret agent for many years. Only my mother knows about this. The rest of our family had no idea. They hadn't told me before because I was so young, and they couldn't be certain I wouldn't tell my friends. My parents had also been afraid for my safety if I had known. Now that I knew the truth, they made me promise that I would never tell anyone. Then my dad promised to teach me to shoot if I got good grades in school this year. It turns out that in those mysterious containers I saw in his closet, he kept weapons and ammunition and other things like that. He usually kept the gun in one of those containers too, but the morning before I had almost seen him getting it, so he had to put it away in a hurry. Now I know for sure that my dad's work is not boring at all. And even though I can't tell anyone about this, I'm still terribly proud of my parents and really want to become like them. Tell us, has someone ever hidden the truth from you for your own safety? Share your stories in the comments.
This December,